Okay, so the YouTube video we're using for this deep dive is called 4 Ways to Torture the Narcissist. Pretty strong title, right?
It is, yeah. But I think it's important to keep in mind that we're not talking about, like, actual physical torture here.
Right.
It's more about understanding how to respond to narcissistic behavior in a way that protects yourself and sets boundaries.
So more like metaphorically torturing the narcissist.
Exactly. The video's by Richard Grannon, and he uses that strong language to kind of grab your attention.
I mean, it worked, right? I'm definitely intrigued.
Yeah, I think we all are, right? We want to know how to deal with these difficult people.
So what's this Grannon guy's first way to torture a narcissist?
Well, the first one he talks about is all about, well, reducing your significance in your life.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you actually do that? Like, do you just ignore them completely?
It's not quite that simple. It's more about a real internal shift.
Okay.
Where you detach from needing their approval or validation. You know, like you stop caring what they think.
Oh, I see. So it's not about pretending you don't care. It's about genuinely not caring.
Right. And Grannon even talks about it like grieving the loss of like an idealized image of someone, like maybe a parent figure or a romantic partner.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you have to let go of that fantasy of who you thought they were.
Exactly. And that can be a really powerful thing to do because narcissists, they feed off of attention and validation. They need to feel important, you know?
Right, right.
So when you genuinely stop needing them, it's like cutting off their supply.
Okay, so that's how you metaphorically torture them.
Yeah.
By taking away that thing that they crave.
Right. It creates this void for them. You know, they're used to being the center of attention and suddenly they're not. It can be really unsettling for them.
And I guess that's where the torture part comes in. Not that you're actively trying to hurt them, but that your actions have this unintended consequence of causing them distress.
Exactly. It's not about being vindictive or seeking revenge.
Right.
It's about taking back your own power and refusing to feed their ego anymore.
So by focusing on yourself and your own well-being, you're inadvertently disrupting their carefully constructed world.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly frustrating for them because it forces them to confront their own insecurities, something they desperately try to avoid.
Oh, I never thought of it that way. So it's like a natural consequence of shifting your own focus, not some deliberate attempt to get back at them.
Right. And this actually ties into setting boundaries, which is essential when dealing with narcissistic behavior. We'll dive deeper into that later.
Yeah, definitely. But for now, let's move on to Grannon's second point. What's that all about?
His second point is about challenging the narcissist's false self.
Okay, I've heard that term before, but can you remind me what it means exactly?
Sure. The false self is like this persona, this image that a narcissist presents to the world. You know, like it's carefully constructed to hide their insecurity.
Oh, right, right. Like they might present themselves as confident and charming, even if it's all an act?
Exactly. It's like they're putting on a show to convince everyone, and maybe even themselves, that they're something they're not.
So how do you challenge that false self? Do you, like, call them out directly on their BS?
Well, Grannon suggests that one way is to subtly challenge or devalue the things they're most proud of. Like, you know, not in a cruel way, but just kind of gently poking holes in their inflated ego.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's about exposing the cracks in their facade, right? Showing that their perfect image isn't so perfect after all.
Exactly. And Grannon says this can actually cause them a lot of distress because it threatens that carefully crafted image they've worked so hard to maintain.
But wouldn't that make them angry? Like, wouldn't they lash out?
Well, yeah, that's definitely a risk. Narcissists are notoriously sensitive to criticism.
Right.
So it's important to approach this with caution and be aware of the potential consequences.
So you're saying it's a delicate balance between understanding their vulnerabilities and protecting yourself.
Exactly. You have to choose your battles wisely.
Gotcha. It's not about starting a war. It's about strategically undermining their sense of superiority.
Right. And Grannon even suggests using some of their own tactics against them, like using subtle sarcasm or veiled criticisms to kind of deflate their grandiosity.
Oh, that's clever. But also, like you said, risky.
Yeah, definitely not something to take lightly. You really have to understand the dynamics at play and be prepared for the potential fallout.
Okay, so challenging the false self, definitely a tactic to use with caution.
Exactly. Now, get this. Grannon's third point is kind of ironic. He says going to therapy, you know, to heal and improve your own life can actually be a form of torture for the narcissist.
Wait, what? How does that work?
It might seem counterintuitive, but think about it. Narcissists, they thrive on control.
Right.
They need to feel like they have power over others, and they often get a sense of satisfaction from seeing others depend on them.
Oh, I see.
So when you focus on your own healing and growth, it kind of challenges that dynamic.
It's like you're saying, hey, I don't need you to fix me. I'm taking care of myself.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly threatening to a narcissist. It undermines their sense of importance and challenges their belief that they are indispensable.
Wow, I never thought of therapy as a form of torture before, but I can totally see how it would drive a narcissist crazy.
Right. It's this subtle but powerful shift in the dynamic. It's you saying, I'm taking control of my own life. Thank you very much.
And that just might be the most satisfying form of torture of all.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered reducing significance, challenging the false self, and even going to therapy as ways to torture a narcissist. What's Grannon's fourth point?
This one is all about narcissistic supply.
Okay, narcissistic supply, that sounds familiar. Remind me what that is again.
It's basically the attention, the validation, and the admiration that narcissists crave. You can think of it like a drug that they need a constant fix of to feel good about themselves.
Okay, got it. So it's like their fuel source. Without it, they start to feel empty and insecure.
Exactly. And Grannon suggests that one way to disrupt a narcissist is to mess with their supply. Specifically, he talks about threatening to expose their true nature to the people they value.
Ooh, that sounds juicy. So like you're holding up a mirror to their worst fears, the possibility of losing that admiration and attention they so desperately crave.
Exactly. And remember, narcissists are all about maintaining their carefully crafted image.
Right, right. So the idea that their true nature might be revealed to like their boss or their friends, that would be devastating for them.
Right. It's like pulling back the curtain and revealing the wizard for who they really are.
Yeah.
Just an ordinary person with flaws and insecurities.
And that would totally shatter their illusion of perfection.
Precisely. And Grannon even compares it to a drug addict going through withdrawal. Like that's the level of distress he's talking about when a narcissist loses access to their supply.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
It really shows just how much they depend on that external validation.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. So by messing with their supply, you're basically hitting them where it hurts the most.
Exactly. And Grannon also talks about exposing hypocrisy in their behavior, showing how their actions don't match their carefully crafted image. That can be especially effective.
Oh, yeah, because it undermines their credibility. It's like saying, see, you're not who you pretend to be.
Exactly. And this can be especially effective if you target those high-value sources of supply, like the people whose opinions they really care about.
So it's about strategically exposing their true nature to the people who matter most to them.
Right. And that can be a really effective way to disrupt their patterns and take back your power.
Okay, so we've got reducing significance, challenging the false self, going to therapy, and messing with their supply. It sounds like Grannon is advocating for a multi-pronged approach here.
Yeah, he is. But it's important to remember that he's not suggesting you become a narcissist yourself or engage in any unethical behavior.
Right, right. It's not about stooping to their level.
Exactly. It's about understanding their vulnerabilities and using that knowledge to protect yourself and reclaim your own autonomy.
So it's more about creating a shield for yourself, not a weapon to attack them with.
Precisely. It's about using knowledge as a form of empowerment.
I like that. Knowledge is power. And speaking of knowledge, I feel like we've just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to unpack when it comes to Grannon's insights.
Absolutely.
I'm already feeling more empowered from this conversation. It's amazing how simply understanding the psychology behind narcissistic behavior can help you feel more in control.
Yeah, it's true.
And remember, folks, you're not alone in this. There are resources available to support you.
Right. And seeking professional guidance can be incredibly valuable. Don't be afraid to reach out for help.
Great point. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still so much more to explore. I can't wait to delve deeper into this in the next part of our deep dive.
Me too. It's going to be good. It's like all their bravado and confidence just crumbles.
If people stop feeding their ego, they basically have nothing left.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that carefully constructed image is all they have.
Remember how he described it? Like their authentic self is buried under all these layers of defense mechanisms?
Oh, yeah. It's like they've built this fortress around themselves to protect this fragile, insecure core.
And that fortress is built out of other people's validation.
Right, exactly. And that's why disrupting that flow of validation can be so effective.
Makes sense, like you're pulling out the rug from under them.
Exactly. It forces them to confront that vulnerability that they've been trying so hard to avoid.
So you're basically saying that it's not about revenge, it's more about self-preservation.
Yeah, I think so. It's about reclaiming your own power and refusing to be a part of their little game.
It's almost like, when you see a puppet show
Oh, yeah.
and you finally realize that there are strings controlling the puppets.
I like that.
You realize it's not real and you can choose to stop being a part of it.
Exactly. You don't have to play their game anymore.
Now, when we were talking about messing with a narcissist's supply earlier,
Yeah.
Grannon mentioned that not all sources of emotion are created equal.
Right. Some people hold more weight than others.
I think he called them high-value sources.
Yeah, those are the people whose opinions the narcissist really, really cares about.
So it's like, a compliment from your boss means a lot more than a compliment from a random stranger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he was saying that, the threat of damaging those high-value sources of supply can really get to them.
It's like you're holding up a mirror to their worst fears. They could lose everything.
Right, exactly. And that's why even the threat of exposure can be so powerful.
It creates this uncertainty for them. They're not in control anymore.
And control is like everything to a narcissist.
It's kind of brilliant when you think about
It is, yeah.
Because you don't even have to actually go through with exposing them.
Right. The threat alone can make them panic.
One example he gave that I thought was really interesting was about exposing the hypocrisy in their behavior. Like showing how their actions don't match up with the image they're trying to project.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It's like pulling back the curtain and showing everyone that the wizard is actually just an ordinary person.
Right. It totally undermines their credibility.
And it makes people start to question everything they've said and done.
And if you expose that hypocrisy to the people they really care about.
Oh, like their boss or their mentor.
Yeah, exactly. That could really shake their world.
That's like you're taking away the very foundation of their carefully constructed reality.
Their whole sense of self just crumbles.
Yeah. And I think that gets at that deep-seated need for control that narcissists have.
They need to be seen a certain way.
And when that perception is threatened, it can trigger a really primal fear of rejection.
Makes sense. It's like their whole identity is built on this fragile foundation of external validation.
And without it, they're left feeling lost and empty. That's why I think Grannon's approach is ultimately about empowering the other person in the relationship.
Because if you're stuck in a relationship with a narcissist, you end up constantly walking on eggshells.
Right. Always trying to manage their moods.
You get so caught up in their needs that you completely lose sight of your own.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
It's incredibly draining, which is why I think it's so important to understand the tactics that narcissists use.
Not to become a narcissist yourself, but to be able to spot those patterns and protect yourself.
Right, exactly.
It's almost like learning to speak their language.
Oh, interesting.
Not to manipulate them back, but to decode their behavior and, maybe anticipate their reactions.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's about taking back control of the conversation.
Exactly. And you can do that by reclaiming your own autonomy and refusing to be controlled by their manipulations.
It's like seeing the Matrix, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They realize that you have a choice.
To stay plugged in or to unplug.
Exactly.
Walk away.
It's not always easy to do, though.
Especially if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist for a long time.
You get so used to their way of being.
You kind of forget what it's like to have your own thoughts and feelings.
That's why Grannon talks about the importance of seeking professional guidance,
Having a therapist to help you navigate those complex dynamics.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like having a guide in the wilderness, someone who can help you find your way back to yourself.
Therapy can also provide that safe space to process the emotional toll that narcissistic abuse can take.
Because it can be really traumatic.
It can, yeah.
To realize that someone you trusted and cared about has been manipulating you.
Yeah. And it can take a long time to heal from that.
And even though Grannon talks about disrupting the narcissist, I think the real focus is on empowering the other person.
Right, to help them break free from that unhealthy dynamic and reclaim their own sense of self-worth.
He said something about true freedom.
Yeah, I remember that.
And how it doesn't come from trying to control the narcissist, but from focusing on your own well-being and living a life that aligns with your values.
It's about finding happiness and fulfillment outside of their approval or validation.
It's like the ultimate revenge is to live a good life without them.
Exactly.
Thrive and be happy, even though they try to bring you down.
And you know what? That can be the most powerful form of torture for a narcissist.
To see that you don't need them.
That you're doing just fine on your own.
It drives them crazy.
It really does. So yeah, I think Grannon's message is really about empowering yourself to move on and create a life that's authentically yours. It's really about recognizing those inconsistencies, between what they say and what they do.
Yeah, totally. So much of what we've talked about so far is about recognizing those patterns of narcissistic behavior, right? Like, how do you actually spot that stuff in real life?
Grannon talks about this idea of mapping their false self. Like you really got to understand the image they're trying to project and what makes them insecure.
Okay, so it's kind of like you're playing detective.
Yeah, exactly. You're gathering clues, looking for those little inconsistencies, like do their actions match their words? How do they handle criticism?
It's like putting together a puzzle.
Right. You start piecing together all these different aspects of their personality.
And you can get a much clearer picture of who they really are.
Exactly. And the more you understand their motivations and vulnerabilities, the better equipped you'll be to navigate those interactions.
So it's not just about reacting to their behavior. It's about being proactive, setting boundaries.
Exactly. And sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all.
Ooh, I like that. Silence is golden.
Right. Grannon really emphasizes that you don't have to play their game.
You can just walk away.
Exactly. Which can be really hard, especially if you're dealing with someone who loves drama.
Oh, yeah, they love to push your buttons.
But remember, you don't owe them anything.
You don't have to react. You don't have to engage.
You have the power to choose how you respond. And sometimes walking away is the best thing you can do.
Because if you don't react, they don't get that satisfaction, that fuel they need.
Right. You're not feeding their ego.
It's like you're taking away their power by refusing to play their game.
Exactly. And that brings us back to Grannon's point about reducing their significance in your life.
Right. It's not about revenge or punishment.
It's about shifting your focus to your own well-being and growth.
So it's about taking back control of your life, defining your own worth.
And realizing that their approval doesn't define you. You are worthy and valuable no matter what they say or think.
That's such a powerful message.
It is, yeah. And it really highlights the importance of self-care when you're dealing with this kind of behavior.
Right, like you deserve to be treated with respect and you don't have to tolerate any kind of abuse.
Exactly. And, something that Grannon kept saying throughout the video is that the goal here isn't to inflict pain or seek revenge.
Right, it's not about becoming like them.
It's about understanding their behavior, protecting yourself, and moving on.
It's about finding healthy ways to deal with this stuff and create a better future for yourself.
And he talks about, living a good life for the highest good of everyone involved.
I like that. So it's not just about you, it's about creating a more positive environment for everyone.
Right, because ultimately, true freedom comes from focusing on your own personal growth and healing.
So you can create a life that truly aligns with your values.
A life that brings you joy and fulfillment.
It's about choosing your own path and not letting them control you anymore.
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful message to end on.
Yeah, it is. If there's one thing I want listeners to take away from this deep dive, it's that you have the power to choose how you respond to these difficult situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't have to be defined by the actions of other people.
You have the strength to overcome challenges and create a life that's authentically yours.
A life that's filled with love, joy, and real connections. And remember, there's always hope.
Yes, there is. Even when things feel really tough, there's always hope.
And you have the power to create a brighter future for yourself.
Absolutely. All right, well, that's it for our deep dive on 4 ways to torture the narcissist. Hopefully you found this conversation as helpful and insightful as we did.
Yeah, it's been great talking about this.
Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.